Hi, Glenys.
Hey, Aaron. What do you want to talk about today?
How much I hate diets.
Yeah, diets suck.
So what do you do instead of a diet?
Intuitive eating. Health at every size.
So how many times have you had to explain intuitive eating and health at every size to someone?
Like 5,000 times. But that was just to my doctor.
Okay, so how many times have you explained it to someone and then they said, but diets are the only thing I know?
That's like every time. Can we pursue health without thinking about weight?
Yes, we can pursue health without thinking about weight.
That's pretty revolutionary, what you just said. But what if you just don't like yourself at the size that you're at?
I think we need to understand why, instead of just saying I need to change.
So, what's the deal with body positivity?
Oh man, that's a long answer. I'm Aaron Flores.
And I'm Glenys Oyston. And we are Dietitians Unplugged.
Welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Dietitians Unplugged. How are you, Glenys?
I'm okay. I got a little cold in my throat, so pardon my voice if it sounds weird.
Yeah. No,
Sorry.
yeah. It's all right. Listen, I've been fighting this cough like for the past month, and so I'll be coughing a little bit here and there. Also, I think it just makes you like that raspiness just brings out your sort of Janis Joplin quality. So like,
I love Janice.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
just embrace it. So
Yeah.
I think we'll get you through today.
Yeah, I always love towards the end of a cold where I'm like, hey, and I sound like I've been smoking for 50 years and like, just give me some whiskey. And I love that sound when my voice gets there and then it goes back to this normal whatever thing I'm doing here. But, so I'll embrace it for a little bit. And, we are embracing the imperfect today.
It's a perfect time for imperfection.
That was a perfect segue.
Thank you. Yeah, we're going to ride this train the whole way. Yeah. We are really excited. We have Laura Westmoreland on, who is going to talk about imperfection, embracing C-level work, and how perfectionism, even trying to do health at every size perfectly, gets in the way of our process. And it's a really great conversation. Let me read Laura's bio to you. Laura Westmoreland is a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Century City, California. The focus of her practice is to help clients identify limiting beliefs that hold them back from leading the life they desire. Laura helps clients explore what no longer serves them to uncover their authentic self. Laura works with trauma, anxiety, depression, relationships, body image, and body shame and eating disorders. She is a certified eating disorder counselor and a certified body trust provider. I think we're really lucky because Laura is in our backyard, not literally, but like in our neck of the woods. And we've been able to each meet her on different occasions separately. I don't think we've actually hung out, the three of us together.
No, but we should.
That will probably happen in the near future if the invite really comes my way. That's a whole separate conversation, but
we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah.
You don't live in our neighborhood, but I guess you could come down.
Yeah, for those LA folks, I live in the Valley, and like I've been ostracized to hanging out with only Valley folks because of it. But
I can't come to the Valley.
Right.
So the traffic prevents me from ever getting there. I know this is a whole LA discussion. Like the traffic, you live there, I live here. We can't go across highways. Yeah, this is a whole LA thing. I feel like the Californians on Saturday Night Live.
And Glenys and I are in couples therapy for it. So we're getting help and we're moving past it and it's really paying off. So thanks to our therapist. So one thing I just want to mention before we get started, and I just want to say a big thank you to our listeners. I've done a lot of traveling, and everywhere I go, people are really just giving us some really awesome feedback about this podcast. So I would just want to thank you all for that because it keeps us going and doing this work, knowing that a lot of people are getting benefit from it. So thanks to that.
Yeah, I love hearing from our listeners. And if you want to send us a message, feel free at dietitiansunplugged@gmail.com. I love hearing what people have to say and how this impacts their life. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's listen to our interview with Laura Westmoreland. Well, Laura, thank you for coming on our podcast today.
Thank you.
It's really great to have you on and share your work with our folks. We are, aside from being another LA Haze person, we need more of those, by the way, right, Glenys?
Oh, yes. And knowing Laura has been great because we've already been sort of hanging out together in LA with a little Haze group, and it's been fun.
Yeah. So we're definitely happy you're on our coast and in our city, but you're also, if in the process of not having completed soon, your body trust work.
I am certified body trust provider, so I've completed
Mazel tov and congratulations.
Thank you.
So why don't you give us and our listeners just a little bit of history, give us an idea of how you came to this work, how you discovered body trust and health at every size.
Well, the way that I came to it, it's interesting. I really wasn't aware of health at every size until I started the Body Trust training program. And I was introduced to Body Trust from one of she's one of our friends that we all share, Lauren Anton, who is a registered dietitian in LA. And I worked with her at a treatment facility for eating disorders and had asked her about her ideas for additional training. I'm a big proponent of training and supervision and, making sure that professionally I'm supported and I'm offering my clients the best that I have. And so Lauren told me about it and I researched it and took a little trip up to Portland where I met Hillary Canavy and Dana Sturdivant and went through the program and really got, I don't want to say, I guess I'm going to say the word entrenched because that's what it feels like. Entrenched in it, in health at every size, in body trust, and really getting a better sense of what's happening and the impact of diet culture. And I could go on, but this is your show, so I will stop right there.
Oh, this is our show, but you're the guest. So please feel free to tell us as much as you possibly can about everything. Entrenched is such a good word, right? Like that is sort of what happens, I think, when we find out about health at every size. And it's like, oh, there's no half stepping here. We're just going all in.
True. And what's so fascinating about that is, and I guess this is kind of a segue into what we're talking about today, is that all or nothing going in 100% really is what I was trying to do. And that didn't go so well. And so I had to step back a little bit and kind of reassess things and I'm not being a good enough advocate. I'm not doing these things that others are doing. And that's when I started thinking about what we learn in Body Trust, that it's okay to do C work. You're encouraged to do C work. And when I mean C work, just for the folks who haven't done Body Trust, in terms of education and the grading scale, A, B, C, D, E, F. So you're encouraged to do C work, which for some folks can be really hard, especially for me too, because I admit I have a little bit of perfectionism that I still hang on to.
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot, showing up a lot in, I think, our work. Erin, you probably see it with your clients, and I do, and Laura, you probably do too, is that everybody's sort of focused on being perfect and perfectionism. I think that's just something else that is sort of pushed on us in our society. This, you have to do it perfectly. So how have you seen the effect of perfectionism on this journey with your clients?
Well, I think a lot, you're right, a lot of folks think I have to be perfect. There's no room for errors. And getting a little geeky clinical here, thinking about childhood and development and attachment figures. How did this person grow up? What was their childhood like? Who was their primary caregiver? What was that relationship like? And thinking about, was this person who, as a child, were they allowed to make mistakes, or did something happen that they didn't have what D.W. Winnicott calls the good enough mother experience, where the caregiver, which is also C work, the good enough mother, got to tie that in, where the mother is responding, or I say mother, but primary caregiver is responding to the child to meet the child's needs. If the primary caregiver doesn't respond in a way that meets the child's needs most of the time, so 80% C work, the child can develop an internal narrative of something's wrong with me. And of course, this is unconscious. It's not the child is really thinking this. Something's wrong with me. I have to do something better. And I think that's part of where perfectionism develops, in that primary attachment relationship. And then as we get older, and especially for females, be nice, be good, be pretty. You're given all these things to be. And it kind of, I wish you could see me, because I'm standing here like frozen, like, oh God, what do I do? And you get to this point where you're afraid to do something because it may not be perfect, which can then lead to procrastination and all sorts of other fun things that get tied into perfectionism.
And I love how you mentioned this sort of fact that it's paralyzing, and I definitely can, like, having met you a couple times, just seeing like I can almost see you standing up and like, the way you would be moving right now, to think about like how that really does stall us, right? And that perfectionism might prevent us from moving in either direction. How do you see your work helping clients like end up moving, like at getting out of that stuck feeling where like it's either perfect or nothing?
I think the first thing to do is, number one, recognize this is some perfectionism that's coming up. And then I think it's a very slow, which clients don't want to hear, that it's a slow process, that you start to move them away from the 100%, and get them more comfortable with, okay, maybe it didn't work out this time, but was there some part of it that was good? So I call it titrating these feelings of moving away from perfectionism, and just having these little experiences. Because when you tell somebody only 80% or only do C work, it can be really jarring when they've moved through life going, I have to give 110% and I have to be perfect and there's no room for mistakes. And the other thing that when I'm saying that, I want to mention is that for some folks, being perfect or attempting to be perfect is a coping skill that has kept them safe from maybe abusive relationships or toxic environments. So that by these trying to be safe and like think about what is that, if that person says this, I will say this, and like really having things scripted out, it's a way that clients can protect themselves. So I don't want to go in and rip that away and go, okay, let's not be perfect. So it has to be done in a very slow, gentle way, while also kind of uncovering what perfectionism means to them and how they got to a place that they feel that they have to be perfect. Like looking at their family of origin experience, looking at their relationships, looking at how they operate in their careers. So looking at all these different factors and slowly, I'm going to say, unpeeling the onion to look at it.
So can I ask one follow-up question to that?
Sure.
One of the things that occurs to me a little bit is how perfectionism in many ways has served us. I think of like getting through like elementary school, middle school, high school, but also the drawback of it, right? It's not black or white, but there is, I think we almost are taught perfectionism at a very young age in many parts of our lives to succeed.
True. Yes, very true.
Yeah, this conversation sort of bringing back to, I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking of where it came from.
Well, you're doing it perfectly.
I know. I'm making a lot of mistakes all the time. I'm so good at that. But Aaron, what you just said was, I agree. Like, I think back to like grade school and just the way of sort of being left alone. And like, I was a high anxiety kid. It was just like, do it perfect. And then the teachers love you. You know, you look at the other kids, some of the ones are acting up and they're having fun and they don't care if they're getting it right. And, at the time I was thinking like, oh, phew, I'm not getting in trouble. But I think like they were probably having a much better time and learning a lot better skills for life. Like just mess up and just like act out a little bit and in the meantime, those of us who are like trying to manage our anxiety in school are like, let's just be perfect. So I think it does start really early. Yeah. And then moving into, Laura, what you said, toxic environments. Like I think of the work environment, like early on felt really toxic for me. So just being perfect was sort of my way of saying, look, I'm okay.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a really good point, Glenys, about the anxiety that it can be associated with perfectionism. And then thinking about our work environments, and we're supposed to perform and we're supposed to achieve. And of course, we want to do it perfectly. And, you don't want to make mistakes at work because you don't want to get in trouble from the boss. So definitely it's everywhere.
There are some jobs where like you're almost expected to be perfect. Like I think of people who work maybe in like the medical community. I think of, people who have very like high stress jobs like air traffic controllers and stuff like that, where like the perfection is actually like necessary.
Yes, that's a really good point. And then I think there have been studies done about air traffic controllers and the stress levels that they're under. So it really does make sense. But I personally, when I fly the friendly skies, I'd like my air traffic controller to be a perfectionist.
I agree. I don't want sea-level work in that area either. So it's an interesting sort of duality that we have, like when we want it, when we don't. But I think sea-level work for me resonated a lot too, as I did this body trust certification. And it's something I continue to emphasize with my clients. So, how has, you mentioned sort of your own perfectionist qualities, but also working with your clients. Like what did, when you first heard about sea-level work and trying to embrace it, like what did that mean for you? And what did that mean for working and teaching your clients that?
For me, it was difficult. And then, of course, I tried to do sea-level work perfectly. So there's that. And I think what I personally learned from it is that when I think about sea-level work, I think about it as it looks different for everyone. It's not a certain percentage, like going back to academia, where it's a certain percentage and you get this letter grade. I think it's different for everyone. And I think in terms of, there are some days when I'm going to do B-level work, and there are other days when I do C-level work. And a lot of it has to do with what's happened during the day, my energy levels. And then it becomes this place of acceptance of like, yeah, so I didn't do everything I wanted to do on my list today, but I did do these things. And that's good. That's cool. That I accomplished something, and that's okay. It's an allowance and it's an acceptance to do this sea-level work and to not be perfect. And what I've seen happen in my life is it's allowed me to have more downtime. And when I have that downtime, to be able to really be in the moment and enjoy doing whatever I'm doing, whether it's knitting or playing with my dogs or watching some show on Netflix, to just really be in that moment and enjoy it and not be worried about, well, I didn't do this and I didn't do that. And it's like, I can just be in this moment. I don't have to do all these things and I don't have to be perfect, and it's okay. And then as the second part with clients, I think when I'm working with clients, part of what I do is I'm going to say a lot of my clients, what I have found, have to-do lists, and they hold off any type of enjoyment or pleasure until they get through the to-do list. Like, I have to tick off all these things on this page before I can do anything fun. And that, to me, it's like, okay, you're trying to be perfect. What if we allowed some fun or enjoyment or joy to come in without having to check off all the boxes on your list and see how that feels? So when I'm working with a client, I'll come at it in different ways. I won't necessarily go, okay, here's how I want you to do C work, and here's what C work is. I think they have to interpret it in their own way. I don't think it's up to me to tell them this is C work. I think it's up to me to help them figure it out. And I may not, express it explicitly, like, you are now doing C work, because I think that would send some of my clients running out the door like, no. So that's how I incorporate it into the work that I do with clients.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because I like to draw a comparison between, like, my clients are usually coming from, diet culture or eating disorders. But diet culture teaches us that we have to be perfect in following the diet, which is why in the end it becomes impossible to follow forever, right? Because you can't be perfect forever. And that moving towards sort of a non-diet way of eating kind of really allows for the imperfection of life. When they're on the journey and they've come in and they say, oh, I tried what you asked, but like, I didn't do it right. And I said, great. Great. I'm so glad you didn't do it right, because I want you to make lots of mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, if we want to call them that, because that's sort of where the magic happens, and that's where we learn.
Absolutely. And if I may, one of the things that I've been noticing, and I've even done it myself, is trying to be the perfect anti-diet follower, advocate, and thinking about, clients who, well, I know I should do this. And it's kind of like, okay, so let's talk about that. I call it the shoulda, woulda, couldas. Let's talk about that. And so it's so interesting that even in trying, working in an anti-diet realm, that there's still some of that perfectionism that comes in terms of, I need to do this anti-diet thing perfectly. For instance, the wanting to lose weight and wanting to change your body versus I'm in this health at every size movement, and I'm in following the principles, and yet I still want to change my body. And I know I shouldn't want that. And it's like, but it's okay. It's okay that you do. It makes sense. Because we do live in this society that overvalues shape and weight, and we're inundated by messages that our bodies aren't okay and that we need to change them. So I think it's also, talking about that and looking at that side of the perfectionist equation as well.
It's I think a lot of this speaks to so much of not just our clients, but also I think the folks that are providers also. It definitely shows up for me, like, that all those things like you just mentioned, trying to be the perfect, right, body trust provider, anti-diet, dietitian, whatever, however we're sort of phrasing it, but like doing it at our best and realizing that, how that affects us on a professional level is really important. So I'm really thankful that you bring that up. The other thing I think about is, like, when you mentioned downtime, is how much we struggle to, we can tell people to like have downtime, but how much individually many of us struggle with our own downtime and saying no to things. I had a really good friend who asked me to like present somewhere with them, and it like technically fit in my schedule. Like there was room, but like there was stuff back to back, and it was really hard. But I was like, I want to do this. There's definitely a desire, but I just can't. Like there's no way I can do this. And they were like so thankful that I set a boundary with my own time. And they were like, yes, we'd love to have you, but I'm happier that you're actually saying no because you would have been overscheduled. And so it's really like what I'm really thankful for is the community where we get to say no and people applaud you saying no, because it means you're sort of taking care of yourself rather than over making you feel guilty for not doing something. And I think that's rare outside of this community in many ways.
That's a really good point. And one of the things to echo to what you're saying is when I would tell somebody no, I used to offer explanations for why I was saying no, and like, I'm so sorry and I just can't. And I would offer these up. And once one of my very dear friends to me said, how come you're doing that? And I said, well, I want them to know that I really want to support them. I just don't have the capacity to do it. And she looked at me in her sassy little way and goes, Laura, no is a complete sentence. And I hold that with me now. I'm like, I get to say no and I don't have to explain. And that for me is also part of like stepping back from my perfectionism and doing C works. It allows me to just no.
Yeah.
And to just sit with the no.
I feel like that's a shirt.
No is a complete sentence on a shirt.
Yeah.
I need that desperately. Yeah, I do a lot of that. No, and I'd love to, and just say no. They don't need to know why. But that's hard for us, right? We want to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
Truly.
And especially in our work, right? I mean, like, we want to help people, so, and I think it's a very natural thing that probably shows up with a lot of other clinicians who do this work.
True. And I would say this to you about that. The way that we can help people too is by modeling the behaviors that we want them to adopt.
100%.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
This is the year I'm embracing no, because I've realized my whole thing is, I want to do everything and help everybody and be involved in everything. And it's like, you cannot do that. Time is finite and I don't have a ton of it. So saying no has been pretty liberating, actually. Like the first time you say it, you're like, I could say it. And they didn't like strike me down. It's like, what did I think was going to happen? But, it's sort of like, ooh, we could do it. So definitely worth trying.
No.
He's test driving it.
You got me.
That was good. That was good. Yes. Excellent. Mission accomplished. So, in doing what I love hearing so much about your discussion, Laura, today is how fortunate your clients must be to work with you. You really, it sounds like you develop this collaborative relationship with them. And so in building this relationship and building this trust with them, how do you help them work on giving up this idea of like doing it, quote unquote, right?
I think it's just validating and listening to what they have to say and accepting how they show up, when they show up, and who they show up as, and just accepting them as they are. Very Rogerian with this unconditional positive regard, and offering a place for them to not be perfect and to show up as they are. I mean, I really think that's a big part of it. Is it's the relationship that I develop with them, and we do collaborate, and they also see me make mistakes and I acknowledge my mistakes and I kind of laugh at them and we'll joke about when I say something wrong. And one of the things that I tell my clients when I first meet with them is, at some point as we're working together, I'm going to make you angry, and that's okay. And you get to tell me. And I'm going to screw up with you. I'm going to mess something up and it might make you angry. And you get to tell me about it. And this is where we work through that. So I think by letting them know that I'm not some type of perfect person who they need to hold up on a pedestal and I'm going to do everything correctly. I just put it out there in the beginning and like, yeah, I'm going to make mistakes. And then we get to talk about it. So I think that's one of the ways that I model imperfection.
I think that's so important to be able to say that to our clients, because I think it really can loosen up the relationship a little bit and say like, hey, I'm going to say something that might make you mad and it might be the wrong thing to say. And please tell me, give me a chance to sort of apologize and to set a new course. And also you might say things that you feel like, oh, I shouldn't be saying this. Cause I'll see my clients sort of pause and like, I shouldn't be saying this, but I'm like, this is our session. Say what you want to say. It's okay to say what you need to say in here, even if you feel like it's not right. So I think that's a great thing to start out a relationship, client-therapist relationship with.
Yeah, I agree so much. And when Laura, you talked about like modeling the behavior that we want them to also adopt. I mean, it's learning to also say like, we can also circle back and do repair work, right? Like it just because I made you angry doesn't mean that severs the relationship permanently. It means now we get to like communicate about that and build that skill to like rebuild trust, and I think that's also so important because that's something we're not really taught. We're taught you get angry and then, there's consequences to that. And for some people, it's like the end of friendships or relationships or interactions completely.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I say by you get mad at me and come in and we'll talk about it and you get to practice with me, which is basically my way of saying you can get mad at me and I'm not going anywhere. I'm still in this with you and we can work through this together.
I love that so much. I think, how do you find that go with your clients, like especially ones that have been in diet culture for so long and that their relationship is black and white with maybe even providers or their food? How do you feel? How do you see that evolving over time with your clients?
I think it goes back to what I had said earlier about meeting the client where they're at. I'm not going to. Well, I am pretty far down the anti-diet road and in my journey, others may not be. So I'm not going to put my agenda onto them. When a client shows up in the room, if they're still dieting and that's, where they're at, that's what we work with. And I offer gentle suggestions when it's appropriate to what's happening in the room, what we're talking about. And I think that's so important they're not coming to me for me to give them my agenda and my thoughts on diet culture. They're coming to me because they're struggling with something or they're in pain. And it's not my role to dissuade them from their dieting behaviors or being involved in diet culture. It's my job to meet them where they're at and when appropriate to offer suggestions of there are other ways. So it's really about meeting them where they're at and not putting my agenda onto them.
I love that. And that must feel really good for them over time as they build that relationship with you.
I hope so.
Yeah. Give our listeners a little bit of information about where they can find you and how they can follow some of your work.
I have a website, which is laurawestmoreland.com. I'm also on Instagram, Laura Westmoreland, LMFT, and on Facebook, Laura Westmoreland, LMFT. And that's where you can find me.
Awesome. And we'll put links to all of that in our show notes so you can follow along with her on her IG accounts and social media and check out her website.
Thanks. And may I leave your listeners with a quote that I have heard from somebody that I'm working with in my personal life. He said, the opposite of perfection is momentum. And that resonated with me like, ooh, I'm not getting stuck in this kind of tying this back to the beginning when we were talking about not being able to move. And I kept thinking about when he said that, like, oh yeah, if I'm moving, then I'm not stuck in my perfectionism because there's momentum and I'm making things happen. So I loved that one.
I love that too. Yeah. It's the perfection paralysis and then momentum is the other way. So do it wrong and go forward.
Absolutely.
Well, Laura, I really want to thank you for coming on the show and, sharing so much wisdom about this. You've done it perfectly, even though you didn't want to. You nailed it right at the C-level work. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll expect a gold star in the mail.
Just half of one.
Yeah, right? We'll also forget to mail it. So
okay.
There you go.
Oh, this is great. See, this is great. This is C work all the way around.
We are nailing it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again. And we'll definitely make sure all of our listeners have that information to follow you.
Thank you.
Thank you.